We live?
Yeah, I believe we're going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, transition. Here we are. Welcome to the 51st podcast of the Hagwon Startup Podcast. Sorry, 51st episode of the Hagwon Startup Podcast. The podcast that talks about anything and everything related to the Hagwon industry. Hagwon being a privately owned, usually language school, particularly the English kind. And we also talk on the show about anything else related to life in general in South Korea, and sometimes occasionally life around South Korea and other Asian countries if that's where you happen to be. On the spare of the moment, I've managed to actually I had Bruno decided to come on to the podcast with me. Let me just get Bruno on here. Right, my video feed is being wanky again. Transition, okay. Here's Bruno. You can see Bruno, but you can't see me. Yes, hi. Hey, Bruno. Welcome. Okay. Now we've got an interesting feed here. 3 windows. Fantastic. Maybe this will figure itself out here with time.
Okay.
So there is like 2 of you now, Bruno. I think maybe I can close this one here. So, okay. How is this gonna work? Oh, brother.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good. So Bruno has suggested, a couple of weeks ago, Bruno suggested for us to have a little chat about student assessment, which sounded just great. But then last week, I got bogged down with things and I wasn't able to even hold the podcast. And then this week, Bruno agreed to come on and do it together. So here we are.
Sorry, hello?
Yeah, Bruno. If you wouldn't mind, maybe... There you go. Okay, we've got a similar... Introduce yourself just quickly. So Bruno has been around in Korea for about 12 years, right?
Yes. I've taught... I started teaching in Hagwon. So I was an E2 visa initially. And so I taught in Hagwon for a while. That was my first experience with teaching here in Korea. I've taught in Europe and other places before, but not. And so that was my first experience, and it was a very interesting experience. And as far as assessment is concerned, it taught me a thing or two, I guess. Mm-hmm. I didn't get much training; it was more like on the go, like as I did things. And they had it was a Herald school, so it's franchise, and they had it. I don't think my boss ever showed me the manual or anything. But as I went along, they did have worksheets with criteria that I had to assess, and like Hagwons, at that time I had like 150 students. I see them once a week if I'm lucky, and 30 minutes, and it was like, hey, and it was funny. Like the first, and I think this is very relevant for a lot of people in Korea, a lot of teachers in Korea. You start, and I hope they don't do this now, and they've improved on it. But because literally, I started working, and then I didn't know anyone, obviously,
right.
Any of the kids, and Bruno, just just go. And I said, is there like a training period or no? Just go do it. And then I think a week. It was a long time ago, so maybe a week after she said, "Oh, now you've got to write 150 report cards." I was like, "Say what? Excuse me?" I have step by step 20 a week or something, and literally, initially, it's hard. How do you assess? And I was inexperienced. I had experience teaching, but not in that kind of setting, and not with so much data, and having to sort through it and it was overwhelming.
Right.
To put it nicely. And yeah, it's just, it was hard, and I didn't have the knowledge that. So today we're going to discuss this, the GSE, right, the Global Scale of English, which is very similar to the CEFR. And
Yeah. So
yeah, yeah.
what gave you the idea of coming up with student assessment? Oh, sorry. By the way, Red Burton is here. Red Burton says hello, and apparently it's Mali and Liam are in the house listening in as well. Hello, everybody. But so what brought you to this idea of wanting to talk about student assessment, I guess? Because you mentioned earlier that...
So let me finish. Sorry, I sidetracked.
Your thought.
So I started the Hagwon, and I went to... I did more like younger kids. I did a program called Mason Appleseed. It was developed by some, I think, Americans in Japan, and they have this big. It's kind of they developed this whole system with the songs and stories.
Okay.
And I got a lot about like the skills, because I went to workshops. I had a 1 week workshop in Seoul. I had a few weekends like in Daejeon and stuff. And they taught you the theory and how to teach and everything. But they also taught you what the expectations, which is basically what this says, right? It says at this level they should be able to do this. At this level, it was very specific. Right? They should know this letter, this sound, this whatever. And that was very helpful. And it that helped a lot, and especially for the younger kids.
Right.
And then I did uni, which was a little bit different. I was teaching like I think it was IELTS listening and reading, if I'm not mistaken. And that was, I didn't really learn much from that in terms of assessment. And then I did, and then from that's, I think the Hagwon and the Mason were very good to teach me, give me some basics on what to expect from students and what to expect from myself in terms of or what I should be doing. So to know what I should be teaching them, and some methodology, like, because how do you reach those goals? What's the strategy? Anyway, so, and then I did a bit of after school, which I don't know how it's these days, but in those days there wasn't much guidance again.
Right.
So it's just like, hey, you got this book, and you just go to the interview and come up with an activity and and then just do your best.
Right.
And okay. So that didn't really help. But then at that point I had more experience after Mason, after the Hagwon, the franchise, and then I could I looked into things, CFR and all this. And I started doing my own study, and that helped a lot, and it improved my teaching a lot. Again, I mean, but at that stage, like, I didn't, to be honest, I wasn't very motivated to spend too much time investing in that. I was more about work, and I started a family, and work and work was the main priority. So I did a little bit of study, and then in university, I studied in Keimyang, and that was my academic. And I did a lot of, I guess at that time I learned a lot. I can't remember the name of the books, but you just learn the methodology, and it wasn't really, I don't think I did much assessment, to be honest. It was more like general teaching and teaching methodologies and styles and all that. Anyway, but it was, maybe, I can't remember, to be honest. But anyway, so that's my experience. And you asked me why bring it up now. I think, and I've been following a lot of posts online, and personally, I felt this. And I run a Kungbu Bang with my wife, and we've been doing it for 3 years now, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
About 3 years, and so I guess since the beginning, I thought that at the beginning, I thought, okay, the system in Korea or the system that they give to foreigners in Korea isn't really, it's not good. It doesn't, I mean, if you're going to hire someone to teach children, especially children, you got to at least give them a rundown of I mean, you don't have to teach them the methodology because you can get academic, but you can teach them, okay, we have a franchise, we have a system, and you need to just train them in that, right? So
You're referring to providing training for teachers.
yes,
Yeah.
a minimal training and
Yeah.
assessment is part of that. Is
Right.
I would say crucial part of that right?
Mm-hmm.
And so recently, so from the beginning, I've been thinking about that, and now I have more experience. I know more about it, and I know that there are a lot of teachers out there that are in that situation, E visas especially,
Mm-hmm.
and I think a lot of F visas, to be honest, will feel that, and they just do things as it comes, right? They don't. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. And people do that they study, they try to improve themselves and how they teach and
Sure.
teach. So, but then I mean, I'm sure like a lot of, especially Kongbubang owners, right? Because that's kind of a lot of in that environment. There aren't as many expectations from parents, although this may vary. So the parents don't really expect like it depends, but compared to a Hagwon, they don't expect you to give them like a big roadmap or they just want the kids to speak, right? Especially in a small class.
Well, I don't know. I don't want to sound condescending, but I think for the most part, parents don't really know what to expect. You know, like I don't think too many parents actually consider the idea of teachers needing training. I think there's the perception. You know, in Korea, teachers are kind of held to a higher standard, right? So I think anytime the word teacher comes into play, people automatically presume that a teacher knows what they're doing. It's kind of like working at a university here, right? Anybody any native speaker who teaches at a university is automatically referred to as a professor, which in most cases is not even the case, right? Because back home, a professor is somebody with the qualifications with a PhD. That's when you become a professor. Otherwise, you're a lecturer. But it seems like in Korea, anytime you work in a university, you are referred to as a professor, which is not necessarily the case. And it feels like, I think a lot of parents in many Hagwons, just parents in general, don't necessarily take into consideration the idea that some of these teachers may be just fresh university graduates who have not really been put through any type of training and have just been put into a position to teach a language that they speak as native speakers, right? So
I mean, no, exactly, and that's another issue. It just, I mean, foreigners are seen. I know this because I know business owners and Hagwon owners, and I have people. I know a lot of people in the field, in the industry. And can I give me 1 second? I need to close the window.
Yeah, sure. And while Bruno is gone, I'm just going to say hello to Tess. Tess is here. Hello, Tess is from the States. Thanks for visiting, Tess. Very, very glad to see you. Rhett Burton is here. Rhett called it the native, teacherism. Native teacherism. That's an interesting term. Is that an actual term or did you just make that up, Brett? And who else is here? Lucy was here. And there is Investors Europe from Mauritius. Pardon my ignorance. I have no idea where Mauritius is. It sounds like an island somewhere in the Mediterranean Sea. Do you know where Mauritius is?
I think it's in the Indic Ocean.
Oh, I was way off then.
Yeah.
Okay, so the name sounds familiar, but I have no idea where it's positioned geographically. All right. Yeah, so, okay, Bruno, you were saying. Please go on.
So what we're talking about, we're talking about the so the parents' expectations, right?
Right.
Yes. So I was thinking then, I know people in the industry, and I mean, an e-visa is basically, from a Hagwon owner's perspective, a marketing tool, essentially. And I've seen a lot of good teachers. And when I say good at that stage in their life, I guess it's more about they have a good work ethic. They have a lot of good qualities that allow them to, even though they don't know how to teach very well, but they know how to get along with kids, or they know how to interact with people, right? So they have people skills, right? Which is very helpful, right? At that initial stage, if you don't have any training, any teacher training. So, but I mean, essentially, that's how Hagwon owners see foreigners. So that maybe that's why they don't train them. And I guess training is tricky. But I have heard of programs where they send teachers for a week somewhere to learn and that does
Yeah.
exist. But I
Well,
think
I
the
think another
most
issue is with Hagwons that a lot of the Hagwons don't actually have a proper training program.
yeah,
These days, I'm sure it's changing. Like we do have a solid training program. We have a methodology, right, a chain that we use. But I think for a lot of the Hagwons that were started in the past, it was more of a money grabbing opportunity started by people who had very little understanding or knowledge of what English teaching actually entailed, and it just hired,
yeah,
teachers or native speakers to teach, right?
it's just a marketing tool. It's a
Yeah,
space.
exactly. So I could see how these places would, completely lack any sort of training. The teachers coming in would probably be given just books that have been used, over the past few years, or the most commonly used books in any
Yeah,
publishing house, and told just go teach that book in class.
yeah,
Yeah. So
exactly. I mean, yeah,
no, go ahead.
yeah, and I mean those and most places, even a lot of the franchises that
Mm-hmm.
have a program,
Mm-hmm.
they will add other books for speaking,
Right.
and to be specific, right? And I've seen really bad like books,
Mm.
and the books are bad, and they don't have training, and they don't have the methodology. It's just it's and they no, it's a problem. So I mean, assessment. You go back to assessment. So
Yes.
assessment teaching, I think. Uh, okay, so one thing I've done in the past, once I got to know more about books and how they're the theory behind them, and like can we name names? Can we say the names of books and stuff?
Books, absolutely. Yes. Go for
Do I
it.
get do I get $1 like like a cent, internet cent bit? I don't know, book bits, the new Bitcoin.
Book bits?
So
Sorry, what? I totally missed that. Are we getting paid for like book promotions? Is that what you're saying? No, I wish we were, man. That'd be nice. That's something to look into later on.
No, but yeah, so like bricks is a good one,
Mm-hmm.
and it follows the CFR.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that you can use to teach, and then you have tests. You have, and then if you don't know what to expect at a certain level, you can go to the CFR. Okay, they should be able to do this, but it's
Yeah.
not here. So then you can figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to
So
throw in that Shane uses the CFR, and that's basically what we have as well.
no, that's a very important part of
Yeah.
the program. And it's an essential part of the program. So I a few times I looked at the CFR,
Mm-hmm.
and I just wrote it down. Like it's kind of boring, but that's how I learn.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people would benefit from this. And there's some theory behind it that comes from other areas. It's more about like how the brain works and stuff. So we have our consciousness, right? We know what we're teaching and what's on the study plan, what we want to do. But then there's the subconscious, right? And
Right.
we are able to train our subconscious, or to we can teach our. So how can I put that? We can train the subconscious, right? So a lot of the choices we make aren't conscious. I think I can't remember what the ratio is. It's like 60-80%.
Mm-hmm.
So if you train your subconscious to think in a certain way, in this case, you somehow put this information, right? This information in your head. Oh, doesn't mean that you can access it all the time, but when let's say a scenario, right? A mother asks you, and this is one problem I've been trying to resolve and trying to get better at. A mother asks me, because it's all very relative, like the assessment, right?
Yeah.
Where is my child right now? Like,
Yeah.
what do you think? And then usually I know, but it's very subjective.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know what the expectations are, arbitrary. I don't know if that's the right word. So because you're saying they're good because of this, and this, or because of this reason, and a lot of it is influenced by your environment, right? So if the kids around you are really good, you'll be like, yeah, based on this, as good as bad as so. So, but those when you make those calls, when you say, okay, he's an A1 based on the environment and the students I've met and etc. That could be wrong, right? It could be inaccurate, and a lot of times I would say it depends on the teacher's experience. If you have 10 years experience, it's different. But if you're starting off, it's a good idea to train your subconscious. And then what that means is, well, what I think it means is, you just read this, right, figure it out how you learn, right? Mm-hmm. How you, again, you don't have to access it directly, but just, you know it, you've heard it before. And if you do it a few times, it's like reading a book. I read a book, some books you read it 3, 4, 5 times. And then when you read it, it's like a deja vu feeling, right? So, and that becomes part of you at the subconscious level. And then when you make those decisions, it's kind of random, but it's based, you've told your brain, okay, this is what I want to come out, and that's what should come out. And it's not going to be 100%, but it will be better than not doing it, I believe.
Yeah, so I think the way assessment works on a personal level is, if you as a teacher use a certain book or a certain series of books, and let's say they are leveled books, and regardless of how good or how bad those books in terms of production, their quality, if you use those books, you will develop kind of a sense for which book or which level what kind of expectations each level of the series puts out, right? So you might have a very poorly written beginner level and a very poorly written high level, but if these are the books that you're using, then you will develop a sense for what constitutes a student that could fit into each one of those categories, right? I think that's what you're trying to say. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
So if you were implementing the GSE, right? What is the
Global Scale of English.
Okay, there you go. Global Scale of English. So if you were using that and implementing that type of assessment, then over time you would develop kind of a sense for where each student would fit in based on what they can produce, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's if I'm understanding you right.
Yes, and the benefit of the global scale of English is that the GSE is that it's global, right?
Right.
It's not just relevant for the Korean environment. And again, there are different environments in Korea. I mean, where if you deal with private school students, it's a different environment. If you deal with, I guess, I don't know, students who have less resources, let's put it that way, it's a different environment, right? So it's a global thing. It's a standard, and that's something worth having, because I mean, some teachers might want to travel, right? They might want to go somewhere else, and if they can if they can get used to that, have a global framework in their head, that's a good thing. Right?
Yeah, sure. But I think that also depends, like the type of assessment that the teachers can implement globally would depend on the schools themselves. Because, I mean, depending on where you go, in Canada, for example, right, there are different, maybe I shouldn't even talk about, because I'm not that well versed on Canadian education systems there and how they function, but I understand that maybe it's states, let's take states, for example. A teaching license in the States, in one state, will not be equated to the entirety of the United States. So I think if you receive a teaching license in one state, I think in Canada as well, in one province, then you may need to have some type of retraining in order to be qualified as a teacher in another province or in another state in the USA. So for example, the CEFR, the Central European Framework of Reference, it has Central European in the title, but that doesn't mean that it only applies to Europe, right? I mean, if for example, like schools in Korea decided to apply this framework of reference for student assessment, then that could be applied. So what is the difference between the CEFR and the GSE? Do you have any incline on that?
I think, okay, yeah, I mean, if you they're about the same, I would say. They're about the same. It's just, okay, according to this, let me see. So I'm just gonna.
Joe says it's worldwide. What is worldwide? The global scale of English assessment, I assume. But I'm just wondering if that's, if it's actually any different or if it's just a name. Because I mean, I don't know who put out the CEFR. Is it the British Council?
I think it was Pearson Education.
The CEFR?
Private.
The surf?
No, sorry, no. Sorry, no, I'm sorry, no. I mean the GSE. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay, so Joe says that the CEFR is a worldwide assessment. It's just called Central European. But I think the CEFR is put out by the British Council. I may be wrong. Cambridge University. Okay, thanks, Joe. By Cambridge University, whereas GSE is put out by Pearson. So oftentimes I think the tests, the ESL market is a huge market globally, and I oftentimes get a feel like it's just a money grab for companies, just like it on a larger scale, like it is for Hagwons and language schools on a smaller scale, And these companies, because when you look at it, I mean, Cambridge University is also a company in its own kind of right? These places compete for the market, for the global market, and the bigger chunk you get, the better for you, right? So Pearson's is a pretty well-known publisher. They've got a lot of stuff coming out, a lot of programs. So the GSE, I think, is just, I don't know.
It's just another framework.
Assessment framework to kind of compete with the CEFR or whatever other assessment frameworks there may be in place right now.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that's fair enough. But I don't think that's.
And it's not like I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm not trying to dismiss it. I'm just saying that it's. I'm not sure if it's any better or worse. I think the goal is to make it, I don't know. Just
so let's get into it. Let's look at this framework. So I mean, what is the purpose of a framework of this framework? So number one, to understand a student's, or what does it allow teachers to do? Precise. So it allows teachers to understand their students' level of proficiency more precisely. And again, I was talking about that before, that mothers will ask me what level their kids are, and sometimes it's difficult. But now it's not. Now it's easier, but sometimes it's tricky. And having like a list of things, I'm talking more for like beginners, teachers, having a list of things having this to look at will make it easier to answer those questions. So do you understand their level of proficiency? To monitor their progress. This is also very important because kids, especially in my environment, this kind of small classes, and it's very organic. So in the sense that, organic, I think that's the right word. So when I teach, if I have 4 kids and one lags behind, automatically, I mean, every class for me is a speaking test in a way. Not officially, but it is. Because I'm asking questions, I'm checking, can you do this, can you do that? I'm checking skills, I'm checking, there is reading comprehension, and reading pronunciation, etc. But I'm touching, can you do this, and this? And so one kid will fall behind, and then I immediately I'll tell my wife, okay, got to figure it out, what's going on, call the parent, maybe talk with the parents, what's going on. So I want to kind of make sure they kind of develop the right skills and follow their progress, as much as I can. So that, because I mean, a good teacher can see the future. Because you see, okay, this kid has these skills and he has these habits and this attitude. Well, I've seen this many times. So, and if you have the system, you can have a more precise assessment of that progress. And that's very helpful, I think, for a teacher.
Yeah.
And again, So another thing that it allows teachers to do is to make more informed choices about next steps, right? So again, this is related to what I just said. If you know where the kids are, their progress, you can and then again, in my case, I'm not going to go from level 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. I'm not going to follow that. I'm going to go from 1. Okay, you just jumped 3 levels. Great, fantastic. And then I have to look at the class and let's jump 2 levels. Why not? reading wise, right? But then you need to know the criteria, right? Okay, they can read really fast, and some kids like read really fast, great pronunciation. But as soon as you say, "Hey, so what did the like reading comprehension? What happened?"
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea. So you need to. That's one example, right? You need to know. Okay, he's really good reader, but he doesn't understand it, or he can't answer questions. So that's. So you need to know those skills. Again, I would say a lot of this is intuitive at some level, but not. But from experience, not every teacher can do that.
Sure.
I'd say, but no. It's that's another topic.
Yeah, well,
Okay,
I agree. I think it depends on how much experience you have as a teacher and what types of environments you've taught. The broader, the better, right? Because this can be applied to anything. As an experienced teacher, you can walk into a classroom and have nothing in your hands and start teaching, out of the blue, because you've done it so many times, and you can come up and kind of gauge where the students are just by talking to them quickly, asking them 2 simple questions, and find out whether they'd be able to understand the next questions that you can ask them, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's definitely intuition as a...
But again, that intuition, there's a subconscious base to it that needs to be trained. And anyway, so and the last thing is you can select and create additional content, which is also something important, right? I mean, I guess in your case, you don't have to worry about that so much. So you need to create handouts, or I'm always trying to think of new ways to teach certain skills, like being able to, like, I think the right word is pragmatics, like using the right expression, the right situation, which is kind of advanced, but you can simplify it and make, like, apologizing or things like that. So I mean, how do you create content for that? Is it a worksheet? Is it anyway, whatever, you figure it out, right? You figure out the right content for the right level. Because if it's too difficult, then they can't do it. If it's too easy, they're not learning enough. And it's like, it's hitting that ZDP, zone of development, what? ZDP? No, zone of developmental fresh, no? What's it called?
I have no idea.
A zone of, can someone help me in the comment section?
General development of...
bloody hell. It's like the right point. Oh man, give me, I wrote this down.
Okay, like mental development in terms of what, language acquisition, or determines, or not determines, but summarizes what a child can and cannot do in terms of speaking or their language, right? That's what.
No, it's not that. It's like this is a technical term. It means like so when you teach something, it has to be the right level, so that the zone of optimal development, maybe.
Okay.
And so
let's call it that. That sounds good, man. Zone of optimal development.
So that's I think it's academic, and basically you choose the right thing that it's like 80% they know, and 90%. That's usually the rule of thumb for reading, extensive reading, 85. So that then they can absorb whatever extra information is added to that, like difficult words or new skill or etc. So so that's being able to get that right is important. And if you don't know what they should know at a certain level, or what they should know, or they should learn, it makes it's kind of shooting in the dark, right? It's like so anyway, so that's the introduction. Now, in this framework,
Joe said ZPD, zone of,
is it,
I don't know, that's
proximal development.
Zone of personal development?
Proximal, I think.
Proximal development. Okay, well, there you go.
I'm not sure. Anyway, I think that's a very fundamental it's fundamental knowledge to have, because and people should read on it, because it's just again, it could be a bit intuitive, but it depends. Some people don't know that, or they don't think about it.
Yeah, Joe was asking if it's not related to their first language. You mean like their first language only?
No, so I mean, this applies to anything really. I mean, if you want to teach something, I have kids, and if I want to teach them something, it can be too hard or too. I mean, it can be too hard, right? It has to be a little bit hard so that they can fill that gap in terms of so that they'll
Yeah, but I
figure
think
out.
that applies to everything. It doesn't have to be limited to language learning. I think anything,
Yeah,
right?
fair enough.
You present children with puzzles that are too easy, they'll get bored. If they're too difficult, they'll leave them behind. So you need to provide things that are, like you say, 80% understood, and then the remainder 20 challenging enough for them,
Like a challenge.
to challenge them, but not to overwhelm them with the new information coming in, for them to like give up, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, if you have an idea of what skills and I mean, this goes into another area of learning where so knowing what skills children should have at different stages, like 7, 8, and that's, I mean, as a parent, you read up on that and you kind of know it a little bit, and that's the kind of so there are two kinds of teachers, right? Teachers who have kids, teachers who don't have kids, and that can create that kind of bit of a so like teachers who have kids will be more sensitive to these things, right? But teachers who don't have kids, maybe, unless they read up on it, or maybe they have a lot of siblings, maybe that their cousins, okay, but they might be less sensitive to that. So and they'll know less. They'll have less skills dealing. Anyway, okay, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let's go back to the framework. So in the framework, we should have said this from the beginning. You can download this paper online on their site. There are different. There's one for young learners, there's one for adults, there's one for academics, teaching people in university students, academia, I guess. And then so today we're focusing more on young learners because I think it's more relevant, right?
Yeah.
For most people watching.
Speaking of academics, we do have some academics here. Red's mentioning that Piaget's theories are very important, and Joe agrees, and I agree as well. And I've studied those, and I remember none. But I know that Piaget is highly influential in understanding how children develop and the learning process of it all. But
that's very
just something that you mentioned earlier, like what are the assessments? Because the way when you first mentioned assessment, you're talking about student assessment. I guess the way I wanted to approach the podcast from, and of course I always forget. Like I've got 1,000 ideas that run through my head. I never write anything down, and then everything is just kind of a mishmash and a blur of everything. But hopefully in the end things come together. But I did dig up basically different types of measurements that teachers use at the present time, and there are 4 listed. And funny enough, these 4 are listed on the Pearson's website as well. And you just touched upon one, which is formative assessment. And that is the second one out of the 4. And formative assessment is, what is it? I'll just read it. It's often viewed as more of a natural part of the teaching and learning process. It can include strategies such as observations, having students read out loud, and asking students questions in class, as well as the use of different types of tools like digital games. This type of testing is used to gauge students' learning during the lesson. Often teachers are evaluating student learning without even knowing it. I think that's very important, and I think it's usually done by people who have been teaching for some time. Like, student evaluation is not necessarily done in written form. It's to evaluate or assess a student doesn't mean that you need to sit them down and have them fill out a bubble sheet or questionnaire in order to understand what level they're in. If you have a classroom full of students, let's say 5, and you're teaching them and they're getting in, but there's that one kid who you think in your head, man, this kid should not be in this classroom. Maybe you think they're way advanced, or maybe you think they're falling behind the material that you're trying to teach. That's a form of assessment, right? Like you basically looked at what you have and looked at the levels of the students, and you decided to assess this particular student to be of a higher or lower level than the classroom environment within which you're presently functioning, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
an assessment doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a test of the
Yeah.
formal sort, right?
Yeah. But then, I mean, at the end of the day, when you're you have a Hagwon, but you need to put it on paper, right? To send it to the parents, and
Yeah,
that's another
absolutely.
thing.
Yeah. So in that case, that's where the bubble sheet come in handy.
So what? So you said the bubble. Sorry, could you repeat that?
Bubble sheets. So
Bubble
like a
sheet.
multiple choice test. So you need to have, a
I
series
see.
of questions so the students can answer, and they're progressively more difficult, and then the students basically freeze on a given question, which gives you an idea of where they are at in terms of their linguistic abilities.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, we do that in class anyway, right? We can gauge, like if I have students in different level classes that we have, I can tell whether the student is ready to move on or whether they're not, if they need more reviews. But when we have an intake, a student comes in, then I will give them the interview and I will follow the bubble sheet and then give them the bubble sheet to fill in so that the initial intake gives me an idea of where that student should be placed, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you have that, that's very helpful. Yeah, very helpful.
Absolutely. I think it's necessary. And I think most Hagwons, from what I understand, like I know David Tulip, I think, developed something like that. I know that Red has something like that as well. I think most people who have been running either Gumbubangs or Hagwons that they developed out of their own kind of, fruition, not the fruition, fruition. At least native speakers that I've talked to, most people have developed some kind of in-house assessment, I think the heavy fist of the ESL industry falls on the Hagwons that were started in the past, like we talked about, just for the purpose of making some money, quick money, without really paying a lot of attention to the quality of what was being presented. But I think that's changing a lot. And I don't know who was talking about that on the podcast. Parents, because right now we teach kids of the parents who basically have spent their own youth going in and out of Hagwons, probably, right? So we're looking at a clientele that is a lot more educated when it comes. That is a lot more educated about what to expect and what can be expected from Hagwons. Joe says, yeah, it needs to be standardized. Yes, I agree. So I think that's why Bruno brought the GSE into the picture, right? That was the
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
Standardization clearly helps because then it provides the same levels of assessment for all parties involved. So, just like McDonald's, I guess. You go to a McDonald's in any country and you know what to expect. There will be some changes here and there, but overall it's the same type of menu that you get. So having a standardized level of testing will allow the teachers, the institutions, as well as the parents kind of know what to expect, and teachers and institutions know what to provide, right?
Yeah.
That's the idea.
That's it, yeah. But then, yeah. So that's kind of the ideal situation, I guess.
Yeah, the ideal, right? Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, and I can see that around. I know that near. I mean, when in the Hagwon, when they're, and that's why I mentioned like different environments, right? And in terms of student environments, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Hagwons. I get a lot of kids from Hagwons, and they learn how to do certain things, maybe answer questions, reading comprehension, again, reading with a good pronunciation, but then they fail to be what's the word to teach everything, right? So speaking and listening sometimes. What's the word? It's got a lot of holes in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be good enough for parents. You said the parents, they know better, but there are a lot of young parents who don't read up on the basic developmental stages, the development stage,
Yeah.
and but then they acquire their expectations from other mothers that they know. Right? So one mother will be like, they have the groups, right? These mothers, and one will, I love this school. It's fantastic.
Sure. But I think what I was referring to is not necessarily that knowledge, but rather a complete absence of a program in a Hagwon, I guess. Parents may not be. Not all parents may be as clued in as some on, what the different developmental stages of their children, or at which their children should be. But they will. I think most parents do have a level of expectations that they hold in terms of when it comes to like choosing a Hagwon, So I don't think it's setting up a school. It's not as easy as it used to be. It wasn't just the white face and the door frame, meaning this is the place to go to learn English, right?
Oh yeah. That's It also depends on where you are. Really.
Yeah, possibly.
I don't know how much competition you have.
Right.
Because if you have a lot of choice, you gotta.
True.
You can shop around.
True.
And that's another. Anyway, that's a topic. So do you want to look at specific things like?
Well, actually, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind running through the remainder of the 3 different types of measurement that is
go ahead. Yeah,
mentioned. So the first one was diagnostic testing. I'll just read through it because it's a lot easier than me trying to summarize it. This testing is used to diagnose what skills a student has demonstrated proficiency on. Diagnostic testing often measures for student misconceptions or where students are in stages along a progression, such as by grade level or concepts or skills. For example, diagnostic reading assessments can measure what grade level students are fluent at reading or based on their comprehension of the text. Teachers use diagnostic testing information to guide what and how they teach. They'll spend more time teaching skills students struggled with most on the diagnostic test. Diagnostic assessment can be a very helpful tool for parents. The feedback my kids received on these tests lets me know the specific areas where they may need extra help at home. So that's diagnostic testing.
Okay.
The formative assessment, which is I kind of mentioned earlier, you were speaking about. Schools normally do not send home formal reports on formative testing, but it is an important part of the teaching and learning process. Because obviously it's kind of done on an ongoing basis in the classroom by your teachers, right? So there isn't always time to like jot things down. But that's something that teachers, I think, usually do, like when you send reports or whatever it is, report cards. So that's probably where most of the formative assessment comes in handy, right? Because as a teacher, you're able to do those and then write them down for the parents to read later.
But I mean, actually, that's one thing I learned from Mason, and at the time it was really annoying. So I was kind of overwhelmed a bit because the program was very demanding on the teacher because I had to memorize everything, and it was hard. It was a hard time.
Right.
And then it was very relatively young kids, right? And a big classes, man. I had it was 20 kids, 25.
Wow. Was that an elementary school?
It's kind of Hagwon.
Okay.
Kind of Hagwon. And that's the system. And I mean, I eventually I got used to it, but it was really I had to memorize it. Just memorizing the whole thing is. And then my boss said, "Well, by the way, why don't you just write down if they say something and just write it down." I'm like,
what?
Okay, 25 kids, and I mean, and at that time I was like, and all the teachers, Korean teachers, there was only me actually, only one part, and it was a pain basically because I mean, and I had this kind of I have to do it by the end of the month or whatever, and some kids don't talk, some kids, they just they're too young, they don't want to be there, whatever. And so you just have negative things. You don't have anything positive. And I had to not make things up. I have to kind of create situations that would give them a chance to
And that
say something or do something.
was that a
And
way of assessment for that particular place?
yeah, that was part of it. I mean, it
Right.
was yeah. I can remember what else I did, but I remember that. But that trained me.
Yeah.
That was the ultimate training because it's some after a while I was like, okay, now I would teach. I did it for about 2 years.
Hmm.
I would teach, and then I burnt out. After 2 years, I burnt out. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't, I can't do it. And but then yeah, so after a year or so, I just started teaching, and my brain would register things. Bing, John
Mm.
said this, Jane said this, bing, bing, and somehow I'd say not all of it, but I'd say at least 50, 60% would stick. And after class, I just write it down. And now I'm doing that,
Mm.
here, and it's much easier, obviously.
Right.
But it's something that it's yeah, I mean, it's good. It's a good. It's if you're not used to it, it's a bit annoying because you want to focus on the teaching, but at the same time, it's like live assessing, right? And
Right.
then you can add it up, and I write report cards.
Hmm.
So, sometimes a bit extensive because I kind of I give tips, I give advice, I give do this, do that. Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Is
Hmm.
he what's going on? And we're kind of our policy is kind of honest. We were
Yeah.
very open, which can be difficult sometimes. But I mean, I want the kids to develop, and I don't want them to wake up one day and then 2 years later, no, you still haven't done, you haven't improved anything. That to me that doesn't make no sense.
Right.
You deal with the issues here and now, and again, if it's feasible, obviously. But in our case, we try to make it anyway. So yeah, we try to make it work. So, but yeah, so sorry. I lost my train of thought again. See, this. I mean, I totally
Well,
long
let me
day.
jump into the third
Yeah.
different the third type of measurement that's used. So that's benchmark or interim testing. This testing is used throughout the school year, often to check whether students have mastered a unit of instruction. There are other types of benchmark assessments that mirror the state summative test as a way to view progress and see if students are on track. When designed for this particular use, benchmark or interim tests may even provide a predictor of how students may perform on the end of the year summative test. These tests are typically longer than formative assessments and are often used for a grade. So I guess these would be like midterm exams, right? That's kind of what we're looking at. Unlike diagnostic tests, students are expected to have mastered material on benchmark tests. Parents will often receive feedback from these tests, which is important to me as a parent, as it gives me insight into which concepts my kids did not master. And then finally is the summative test, assessment test, which is basically, I guess, the final test, and it summarizes everything that the student may have learned throughout the duration of the program. Summative assessments are used as a checkpoint at the end of the year or course to assess how much content students learned overall. These tests are given to all students in a classroom, school, or state, so everyone has an equal opportunity to demonstrate what they know. Students demonstrate their ability to perform at the level prescribed as the proficiency standard for the test. Results are often aggregated to also understand school and district performance for the purpose of accountability, and so on. And then combining test results, we need a balance of the 4 different types of testing in order to gain a holistic view of our children's academic performance. So I guess what this is saying is Sophia says she needs to go to sleep. Okay, bye-bye, Sophia. Have a good night. One of our chat viewers just disappeared because she had to go to sleep. You gotta go to sleep as well? Yeah. So, yeah. Assessment is very important. Joe also agrees, and one of the points she brought up here in the chat was that the problem that Korea is struggling with is that there is no standardized assessment, meaning that different schools may use different types of assessments, and whatever testing is done in one school may not necessarily apply in another, and so the skills that are being taught to students are not necessarily as good or as bad as another Hagwon or a school may suggest that they are, because there is no standard, right?
Yeah.
So
And it reminds me of something you mentioned before, like how I think you mentioned it, like some parents will change school because they went to another school and
right.
they assess them, and then well, he can't do this skill that
Yeah,
we're very good at, and he should
absolutely.
come to us. And it's like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah, that's
Okay.
exactly what happened with us. We had students who, we like our school is a speaking school, so that's what we sell. This is the program that we offer. So people who come here want to learn to speak. So we had a couple of kids, and after about 6 months, the parents decided that they took them to a different competitor here across the road, and were told that their reading and writing skills are not up to par, which was surprising because, like I said, that's not what we sell. We sell speaking. And that's not to say that we exclude reading and writing completely, but it's practiced to a lesser degree than some other competitors may be doing. And so after the boys left, I looked at their very recent test results, which was basically a written test, reading and writing test, and their scores were in the 80s and 90s. So, based on our standards, which again are based on the CEFR tests, because that's what our material is modeled on, that's what it's built on, they were doing just fine. But whatever standards the other competitors uses, their reading and writing skills were not up to standards. Whether truthfully told or just to get the clientele away from us and towards them, whatever the reason is, but a lot of parents buy into that, and those are the results, right?
Yeah, I mean, your program, what I feel is that it's very, it's a natural way, right?
Yeah,
Because they learn gradually and step by step,
right.
and that's how I'd say if you want to learn a language, that's kind of how most people will learn.
Mm.
But then sometimes for some parents, so some parents might find it slow,
Well,
and
all parents expect the magic pill, right? All
yeah,
parents
yeah,
expect their kids to speak after 6 months of, an hour or 3 hours a week practice.
it depends on the child.
Yeah, it depends on the child and how much work they put in outside of school. And so if you sit a kid and make them do homework every single day of the week, of course they'll learn how to read and write. But I guarantee you they will not improve their speaking skills because they haven't spent any time working on those. So like,
Yeah,
it's
and
something that
yeah,
many parents don't understand, and it takes some time to educate them on that topic.
and I mean a lot of the speaking and writing skills, which is what most students lack. Um, it's a process, right? And
Yeah.
it talks about it here, like I highly recommend reading this, man. By the way, so it says here, what was it in the writing part? What was it? I don't know. Actually, at the beginning, it
Mm-hmm.
explains like a few insights that the framework has.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is like in the writing process, scaffolding, right? So you kind of give them. Are you familiar with scaffolding?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You build on top of things that were previously taught in the past.
Yeah, and you give them as because learning to write is a process.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have to learn it gradually,
Mm-hmm.
and add things and also the one thing that really struck me was the making the writing process relevant, right? Things like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's if you look at I would say the most Hagwons. I'm generalizing, but let's say normal Hagwon.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a side note. So I see a lot of Hagwons, but very few O Hagwons, which is just something I noticed recently. But anyway, so
Oh,
and
Hagwon is
Hagwons,
refers to the English Hagwon, right?
but I've seen Hagwons with English natives. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, so those Hagwons will teach writing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like they follow this kind of step-by-step thing and just do the topic we choose when you
Mm-hmm.
got it. And so yeah, I mean, making it relevant. And after reading this, I always try to make things relevant. But the writing is a little bit difficult, especially at lower levels, because I mean you got to write about you.
Yeah.
Well, that's the first one, right? And you got to write about your toys or your room, and but making it relevant is very important. And so yeah, we a system where you can know the so the skills that they have to know and then and make it relevant and teach those skills and teach the right way, right? Is important, and that's something that a school like yours can do, I believe. But you said you own. We don't talk about that, but So in other Hagwons, it's I mean, if they focus on a certain skill, again, I mean, these guys have probably been in business for a while, so they know what they're selling, right?
Yeah.
They're pitching. They're not. It's not education. It could be education. Okay, I shouldn't say that. But they're pitching. It's a business. They're pitching.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then, I mean, you gotta. Each parent is different. Each parent's again has different expectations, and they can be. They don't. A lot of them lack the big picture.
Yeah, I think I remember hearing somebody mentioning exactly that basically they had parents coming into their Gonbubang or Hagwon, whatever it was, and a lot of parents, they found that a lot of parents had no idea about what to expect from their children in terms of, the production, what their capabilities were, even linguistic capabilities, right? Like kids are able to produce the past or the present tense at a certain stage in their life, right? And prior to that, they just, their mental capabilities are not there yet. They just can't grasp those concepts. And a lot of parents are not aware of that. So that's a big obstacle that I think, as a Hagwon owner or an educator, you need to be able to explain that to parents who may not have the background of education.
And also, one thing that as a teacher I've tried to get better at is how to, and I have a lot of experience learning languages. I guess I should do that. So I know what it feels like to be on that side of the feelings. And I call it waking them up, basically. And waking them up can mean in terms of maturity, because sometimes maturity gets in the way, lack of maturity, lack thereof. But also and this I learned from Mason, because they had the whole theory on learning how many hours you need to do, and I think it was 1,000 hours or so of meaningful in-class learning, and then your brain just clicks. And I know that feeling I've done it for many languages. It's like you wake up, right? And so how do I speed up that process, right? And sometimes it's not about a following program. It's just, you got to tweak it so you can, okay, you got this, you got that, you got this skill, you got that skill, let's go this way. And how do you awaken them, And then you can start teaching certain things, right? Like you said, the present tense, past tense, you need they learn at different stages. But for that, and I was talking with someone else the other day, about inductive learning, where you, instead of saying this is the rule, so you have to follow the rule, and no, you teach, and as you teach, okay, look at this mistake, and I had a lot of side. I had a teacher in Keimyong, she taught me Korean, and she had this. She was very. She had this thing, like she would say, she'd say, "This is an amazing mistake, man. This mistake is fantastic." Everyone's like, "Whoa, what do you mean?" And it's just you make a big thing out of it, and then she'd explain, because you did this, you did that, but you should do it this way. And so inductive, right? You teaching, and then when you see, okay, he's ready for me to listen. He's ready for me to point this out, and then their brain goes click, and that click is worth more than memorizing patterns for months or years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's called acquisition versus just memorization, right?
I know. Okay.
To acquire language is basically what helps you speak it will helps you learn it versus just brainless memorization, which is what a lot of students here do in Korea in terms of when it comes to vocabulary. So one of the things that I remember learning in my psych classes was that if it comes to learning of vocabulary, one of the best ways, memorization is good if you want to do, if you're cramming for a test, right? And you've got a night left, whatever, and then you cram or try to memorize as much information as you possibly can. And you will, but that information will deteriorate very quickly, very soon. Versus learning things by actually understanding them. So, for example, for vocabulary, you could cram as much vocabulary into as short period of time as you could and try to memorize as much of it, but you will forget 90 to 95% of the stuff that you will learn. But when it comes, if you want to learn vocabulary and have it retain it for longer periods of time, then you need to take that vocabulary and use it in meaningful ways, like by writing sentences with it, or basically devote more time to each individual word, but in a more meaningful way, and that will create longer lasting memory slips in your mind, I guess. Let me just read quickly through some comments, because there's a bunch of comments here. Lancers B4, I have no idea what that is, but I know that person knows us. So Lancer says it's very challenging to teach all 4 skills and get standard level competencies at all times. Kids grow at different rates, have their own strengths and weaknesses. True. When you teach one-on-one, then you can really tailor the program to student, but even teaching a small class of 6 to 8 similar leveled kids will have variations in their acquisition and proficiency. Yeah, absolutely. And then you also have, the time of a teacher is divided amongst the given number of students. If you have one-on-one classes, then the student gets like a full hour of the teacher's time versus 8 students, that hour is divided, in 8. But parents in Korea often expect perfect scores because their kids do well in school. So why not here too? But well-designed language tests like Cambridge have some reach above the testing level. And expectations, perfection if your child is taking a test that is actually at their level is unrealistic. But often Hagwons are pre-teaching and kids know material well in advance of their school tests. Yeah, so that's true. These days, Cambridge are becoming more popular. Often problems that Hagwons written on them for skills.
Yeah, I mean, the whole issue about memorization. I mean, as a learner, as a language learner, I see memorization as useful in the sense that it's a muscle you're working.
Yeah.
And it's like, for me, especially when I was learning Chinese, I had to start from zero. That was my first Asian language, and the characters were tremendously hard. And so I figured it out like a very. I did it. I managed to. And so I had to memorize basically, and I had to learn memorization techniques and mnemonics and all this.
That's the downfall of because I mean, Korean is based on Chinese, and I think this is where it comes from. Like the whole educational system in Korea kind of relies on this whole memorization because you need to. Kids in Japan, it's the same. Kids in Japan start early on and start having to memorize because they've got so many. I mean, Japan's got three alphabets for Pete's sake, right? So as a young kid, you need to learn early on and start memorizing all these letters and all these different structures of writing so that later you can actually function in society, right?
Yeah, so but I'm just but I was just talking about the benefits of memorizing. So memorization, I see it as you're sending a message to your future self, and it's like an echo, and that can be useful if you build up on it. So you send it, keep sending it. At some point, it will start coming out. It's like can you? I think that's
but memorization has to be meaningful. Otherwise,
I'm just saying. If you combine that, meaning meaningful learning, and I highly recommend the four strands. I want to learn more about that from what's his name? Anyway, meaning definitely 100%. But so what are the benefits of memorization? And memorization, there are different kinds of memorization, right? Like there's like sitting down and memorizing 50 words and translating them, which is not a good idea. But again, as I said, you're sending a message. It's not about, if you think about long term, it could be a good thing. If you think about, especially if you're starting from nothing, because to build something, you need to, when you start a new language, you need to build the base, especially when you're an adult. I guess when you're an adult, it's different from when you're a child because it's more your brain is more malleable. So anyway, but what the benefits of memorization would be that it's a skill. It allows you to learn more in the long term, right? You'll be able to absorb more. But then the key thing is that the purpose is not to memorize, but to get better at memorizing and to send those messages in the future. So when you give a speech, you remember that word that you saw randomly. I used to do this a lot with Chinese. Like I'd be like, and then some of my friends say, "Why are you learning this word for a pin in a grenade?" I think that was one of them. A pin in a grenade. Like, why that word? I don't know. It's whatever. Yeah. And then later, I don't know, it's an example. But if you learn, do you understand what I mean? So yeah, meaningful learning is key, essential.
And I think it all depends on people as well. Because for me personally, by the way, this is Kat. Kat is in the text in the chat. That's Lancer. It depends on the individuals. So Kat mentioned she read something interesting research about creating visual representations of pictures of vocabulary. It is so much more meaningful than translation memorization. I think, there are different ways of learning and everybody learns in different ways. Like for me personally, I learned holistically. That's why I was always a horrible failure when it came to psych tests, because all the testing in in my psych courses was done through multiple choice questions, and I was horrible at those. I would sit in a classroom and listen to the prof, and I loved the lectures and I could tell you what the lecture was about, but then if I had to go back home and study and memorize details, I was completely lost and I bombed most of my tests because I just couldn't do it like that. So for me personally, memorization doesn't work. I can't sit and try to hammer words into the back of my head, into my subconscious somewhere by blind memorization and repetition. I just don't function like that. For me, it's a lot easier, a lot better to do things hands-on and learn by doing, or the best way to learn is by teach. And that's basically how I learned most of the English grammar that I can teach now. I've done it through learning, not through teaching, not through memorization or learning it myself. You know what I mean? So I think just like with anything else, and things are good in moderation. So I don't think that anything should be excluded completely. Like do some memorization, but also make sure that the stuff that you've memorized, that you're able to use it in a meaningful way. Because that's the ultimate goal, right? You can memorize the vocabulary, but what's the purpose of memorizing the vocabulary? If you're just memorizing the vocabulary so you can translate it later on a test, then scientific research has shown that most of that stuff will be forgotten. If you don't continue using that memorized vocabulary in some meaningful way that applies to your life and is useful, then you will forget most of it, right?
Yeah, but that's where they kind of synergize, right?
Yeah. So you need to memorize it, but then use it somehow that is useful, because otherwise what's the point, right?
Yeah, so another metaphor is like filling up a can, right, with water with other words, and then I guess pouring it.
Just letting it sit.
Yeah, but and then
ferment.
But so that's. What is it? Aren't there like four kinds of learners? Kinesthetic. I always forget. Kinesthetic. That's like touching, doing things.
Tactile stuff.
There are four men. Long time ago.
Possibly.
Auditory. Yes. The listening. So visual, I guess. Yeah, visual. And there's another one. And there are 4 kinds of learners. Yeah, and each person is different. And yeah.
Now that Kat mentions it, I remember learning in reading articles and studying about a type of memorization that uses mnemonics, which was a very interesting way, and it worked for me personally. So basically, I think either Kat mentioned it here or you have. If you have a word that's presented in an unusual environment, you're more likely to learn that mundane word because it stands out, right? So if you're driving down the highway and it's you've got a clear blue sky and it's just a monotonous highway ahead of you, and you're looking outside the window, and on the side of the window you see a freaky looking tree that bent in a crazy shape, and that stands out because it's something that you wouldn't expect otherwise to see. So presenting a mundane word in an otherwise, presenting a, I guess you could flip it the other way around. Presenting a mundane word in an otherwise creative environment will make that word stand out more because it's oral, visual, kinesthetic, and reading. There you go. Those are the 4 different learners: oral, visual, kinesthetic, and reading.
Okay, there you go.
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there is some science behind it. I can't remember which video it was. I think it was kurz gesagt, which is it's English, but in a nutshell, I think. It's a very interesting YouTube channel. I think it was there that they showed that. I mean, it was evolutionarily speaking, we needed to be watch out for different things. Because you got your everyday life in the village or whatever, and then if you see something move in the bush, you're like, whoa, what's that? You die if you don't react quick enough, right? So I guess that's
it's an
interesting,
animal
right?
instincts.
There's some science behind it. So yeah, I mean that's interesting. Like so you're putting a word out of context, but is it out of context or
No,
it's
it's not out of context. It's in context, but it's just surrounded by. So I guess the example I was giving is the environment is mundane, but the word that you're introducing kind of stands out somehow. That it's not, it's a part of the environment, but it's unique in its own way.
Like a gorgeous shape.
Yeah, like, so, I don't know, if you have an old barn and it's standing there, but then you open the barn and inside the barn there is a beautiful red, vibrant rose or something. So if you were to learn the name for a rose, then that would be the way. You've got a gray barn with a gray door, and you open it up and there's this beautiful red rose. Rose, what color is it? Rose is red. I don't know, something of that sort, right? Yeah.
Scarlet rose.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, but yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean there are many memorization techniques, and again, you this is another area.
Yeah. We started on assessments and we're talking about learning. That's fine. Yeah, that's good.
I mean, it's hard. They're connected, right?
Yeah.
And part of assessment is knowing what students can do. And I'm not talking about language. I'm talking about, like, a simple example is, can they write? Right? There's some kids, they're great at reading, great at speaking even. Like, they go to English kindergartens and they can't write. And for me, a few years ago, I would have said, I can't teach them because they're really good, but they don't have the skills that I think they should have at this level, and which makes sense. And I was like, what's going on? But now, okay, they're really good at most things that they can't write. Okay, fine, we'll work around it. I have my own ways of getting around it. But so knowing being able to assess their skills that are outside the language, right? That's all important. And you need to do kind of a little bit of research, I guess. It's not hard. It's just type in what can kids do at this age and what should they be able to do.
It would be pretty easy to find it on Google if you just.
Yes, not that. Again, having kids helps. And having kids helps double.
Yes. I don't know. Like your kids are, I think they're about apart in terms of age. They're apart 2 years or 3 years apart.
2 years. Exactly 2 years.
Yeah, okay. Mine are like 2.5. I think my wife believes it's
Wonders.
3, but it seems like yeah, the time difference between your kids and my kids is about the same.
That's
But
same,
your
yeah.
kids are older, right?
Sorry?
Your kids are older than mine, I think.
Yeah, so they're a third grade and going this year, third grade and first grade.
Oh no, so your son is third. So my daughter, okay, so they're the same age.
Same age, I guess.
All right. I honestly don't remember how they were and what they were able of doing when they were younger. Just- that's
Yeah,
why I have so many video clips on my computer, so I can look back on those things one day and be like, aha, that's where they
that's
were in
amazing.
their
That's
developmental stages.
amazing. One of the wonders of the technology, right? That
Digital
you can
technology.
record and
Absolutely.
recording, like keeping all those memories. It's amazing. It's never
Absolutely.
happened. I mean, in that, yeah. So yeah, but it's helpful having kids help. Okay, cool. Man, I have house chores.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been on for over an hour and 20 minutes, so we need to
And
wrap this up.
yeah, and
So,
okay. So yeah, tell me what's up.
oh
Yeah,
no,
so
go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, so I mean, we didn't get into the details of each level. Maybe you can do that another time, or if that's interesting,
Maybe we
guys.
could do that. Analyze a little bit more, kind of
Right.
dissect it.
Sorry.
Analyze it a bit more and dissect it. The GSE.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's something that we could do, and then someone can listen to it like a podcast, and then we just go through them,
I
and
think we
then
can do that. Maybe like what, next week or in 2 weeks from now, whenever you have time.
let me get back to you on that.
Yeah, because I would have
And
to read through it first to have the ins and outs exactly of of that, so we could have a proper, intelligent conversation and dissect it in a proper way.
sounds good. Thank you for this. I really appreciate inviting me to your channel, and
Oh,
I really wish you all the best. And
thank
I
you.
hope everyone gains some knowledge and learn something, and hopefully you can contribute one day.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, man. I was really psyched that you came on because it's been a while since I had, I guess, somebody else to talk to. It was just me rambling on for the past couple of months, man. So
I'm very very
thanks,
thankful for your time.
thanks for
Okay,
coming on,
have a good
man.
night.
Okay, have a
Yeah,
good night. Bye
good
bye.
night. Bye. Yeah.
All right. So Bruno is gone, and I'm going to disappear as well. Thank you for tuning in. This was a fantastic conversation. Thank you, Tess, Lancer, Kat, and Joe, and Rhett, who was here, and Lucy was here, and a fella from Mauritania. Wow, that was a pretty good turnout. Thank you all for tuning in and listening into the podcast today. Maybe next time, whenever that's going to be, hopefully I can convince somebody else to come on again on the podcast and join me for next week on a discussion. And maybe like Bruno said in an upcoming episode, again, he's a guy, I'm surprised that he managed to squeeze out his early appearance here today, because usually I think he works a little bit later. So maybe in the next month or so, maybe we can get together and talk a bit more in depth about the GSE. Good night, Rhett. Cheerio. Have a good night, guys. Please remember to support the Living Korea channel. If you're new here, hit that like button. If you've been here before, make sure to hit that like button. If you're new, remember to subscribe to the channel. Come back for other updates from the Living Korea channel, and have a wonderful week. And Chuseok. All right, next week is Chuseok. It's a Monday. I think I will. Not Chuseok. Solal, Chinese New Year. Not Chuseok. Solal. I'll be here, I believe, because we're working on a new school. So my wife and I, Lucy and I, will be over there probably and renovating and doing all kinds of stuff. So I may be able to squeeze out a podcast. I don't know if any people will be here or not, but in any case, enjoy your vacation. Have a happy Solal, happy New Year, and we'll see you next time on the Net Podcast. Have a good night.